Good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming, and thank you for being here with us, John.
My pleasure.
Yeah, this is great. It's such a lovely little series, and has anybody had the chance, since it's been out since Friday? Has anybody watched all 6 episodes?
You must.
Yeah, you really must. What's so great about it, unlike a lot of series, it doesn't take a huge amount of commitment of time. It's 6 half-hour episodes, and they're just absolutely beautiful. It's a terrific binge. Do you binge watch anything? Have you ever binge watched anything?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Lots of things.
Yeah, sure.
What else?
So, but this is like almost like a mini binge. It's not enough, although it feels almost just right. So
right.
Only to
What's
do
that? Catastrophe, which is another 6-episode Amazon thing.
Well, this is almost on like a British model of some
sort.
sort.
Yeah, it is. I think it actually
TV.
is a British. The 6-episode short binge is sort of a British thing.
Right.
I think.
So this is like British TV done in the South or something, So it's like who knows, right? But it is a lovely second season, and it's a very different second season, especially where you're concerned. You and the brother Remy have major character arcs, which we're just getting started in this episode. So let's maybe talk a little bit about where it goes and why this was such a special second season for you and the character of Bill, because it really is. It's almost like the awakening of Bill this season, right?
Well, if anybody's seen the first season, they're grieving. My wife and Tig's mother dies at the very beginning, and her loss informs everything in the first season. And Bill's already a very closed-off, repressed kind of character who's trying to deal in his way with the loss of, the love of his life. And gradually during the season, having to do with the cat and with Tig moving back in with him, and Remy lives upstairs, he's starting to open up and live again very gradually. And in this season, he actually comes alive again.
I think in the first episode, I think there's just the one elevator scene with yourself and Cheryl Lee Ralph, who plays Felicia.
Is there that scene? No, that's in the second episode.
Oh my gosh! Okay, so everything begins in the second episode. So you've got so much to look forward to here. But it is a major turning point.
The first episode, yes, but not for. It seems like Bill is where you left him in the first. He seems like very much the guy at the end. But again, at the last episode, very wonderful last episode of the first season, where the whole question of molestation and the fact that she was living with him when it happened and he didn't do anything, and it's all brought up. And she leaves, she's gone back to LA, and she butt calls him. And there's a moment where you see how much he loves her. There's just a fact that he says, "I think of you as my daughter." Whereas I have to say that earlier in the thing he said, "But you're really not my daughter legally, and you're not entitled to anything."
He's a very precise man.
It's very precise.
Yes. Yeah. Now, one of the things I saw in some of the material was that when they presented you this character, he was described with a certain way. Do you remember how that was?
Yes, he is described. Actually, you see it as someone with a temperament between room temperature and sleet.
Yes, that's great. Isn't that awesome? So now, what kind of a challenge is that for you to be able to bring that kind of a character to life?
Okay. Well, we're in a room mostly, I assume, of actors. So I think you'll appreciate this. It came as a breakdown, and it came from my agent in LA, and I read it, and I thought, I couldn't be more wrong for this. They are completely crazy. They don't know me. What do they do? And my wife, who fortunately is sitting here tonight, said, you're an actor. It's called acting. You better figure out how. And, it was a series regular, so there was something you wanted to be able to figure out. And there are 2 documentaries with Tig Notaro. Tig is a Showtime documentary, and it's sort of. And another one is a documentary of her stand-up. And there's a Moth radio hour devoted to her father.
There's one where she goes on the road. Is that the Tig?
Yes, that's the one on the road, and then there's sort of one where she meets Stephanie, and it's more autobiographical. Gotcha. But before her mother died. But anyway, her father, Tig's stepfather appears in one of the documentaries very, very briefly. And I saw what he looked like. And I saw that he was wearing the glasses that I'm wearing there, these very particular glasses. Cool. Yeah. My son's girlfriend's father is an optometrist. I went to 20/20 Optical and said, can you find me those glasses? And I did. And so it was that very much the outside in kind of working, coming up with a physical character, coming up with a look of him. And then it just kind of came alive.
Another challenge here is when I see characters like this, that the idea of trying to find humor in humorlessness, it's a very tricky balance, I think, to do. But you do find it, and the scene in the kitchen with the two women is like, it's very funny, but it's so internal. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, it's very interesting. I mean, I think it's the writing. I mean, it's great. It really, the writing in this show is so superior, and really refined, and so it's there in the writing, and you just sort of live that character. And I mean, I never thought of it as funny. I mean, really, I am. It's funny because Tig is I personally had a lot of discomfort, partly because I'm not that guy, and I didn't want them to find out. So it was sort of,
That's cool.
And then Tig is Tig, as fabulous and brilliant as she is, we had an uneasy relationship, and it was probably because of who I play in her life, and all that worked for me. All that helped. I said, good, I'm uncomfortable. Bill's uncomfortable. That's Bill, and that sort of served that vision of him.
Well, have you met the actual stepfather by now?
No, I haven't. I considered it. I mean, he's alive, and apparently has not killed her for portraying him this way. No. I decided it wouldn't be a good idea, because I have to say, one of the things very interesting, and she said, this show starts off in season 1, it's 80% reality, her life, and by the time you're at the end of season 2, it's maybe 20%. There's a lot of invention, and so Bill has emerged as his own character. I mean, he's based on Rick, on her father, but he's not.
Yeah, but I understand that there's, this isn't like a carbon copy of that character. That it really is a fictional version of a stepfather that Tig would have in a very uncomfortable household.
Yes, and there actually is a Moth Radio Hour completely devoted to Rick, to her relationship with her father. It was very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did this even come across? How did you get connected with the show, and how did you get on their radar? I'm just kind of curious how this all comes together in this lovely little series.
Well, that's like every other actor in the room. I mean, the agent read the breakdown, thought, oh, that guy's 60, or that's an old guy. I got him on my list. I mean, that's sort of how I thought it started, really. That's why I thought they don't really know what they're doing asking me to do this. But I just am the right age. But no, But my wife warned me to only answer one question at a time.
No, that's
so
okay.
However
you want to keep telling the story, that's fine with me. So you tell the story however it fits, because it just sort of fascinates me. The world of making One Mississippi.
Right.
You go down to, I believe you're not in Biloxi, you're in.
Well, we're in New Orleans, and then in actually a place called Pass Christian, Mississippi, which is where she's actually from.
Right. Okay. So you're kind of in your own little remote world. It's not like you're doing it at a place where there's a lot of production going on or something like that. So it's a little world that's created here, and in that regards, I'm kind of curious. You do the 6 episodes in how much time?
About 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. I'd say 7.
Right.
The way, actually, I have to say that the interiors were all filmed in L.A.
Okay.
And a few exteriors, but and then we go to and do all the exteriors in New Orleans. The first season, it was in Galveston, because Louisiana took its tax credit away, and suddenly Amazon pulled out of Louisiana, and we were in Texas. But it's Gulf Coast, Mississippi, and they're all very similar places.
So you are sort of getting away from your regular world when you're in that world. So does it help a little bit to be on location?
Well, that leads me to say that I was, with this idea that when I was finding the character, and especially like doing the pilot, I was doing a little Daniel Day-Lewis for me because I was trying to stay in character, and because I thought it would be very hard to be me and then Bill. I don't know. It just so for that I did try to sort of stay in that world, in that character, and if I went to my trailer, I just I sort of I had a Bob Dylan song, Mississippi, that I listened to endlessly, and I tried to keep that. This season, one of the great really really gifts of this whole experience was doing the second season of a show, which I've never done. I've never been in. I mean, I was a regular in one other. I've been on Fail series,
right, okay.
but I've never been in a second season of a.
To be able to dig deeper into a show in a second season,
yes,
right?
And they then first of all they're not going to fire you. You're beyond that. And they probably in this case they're not going to write you out. And so there's a relaxation. There's a kind of okay, they bought it. I can do this. I can relax and have more fun with it. So.
Was this one of the shows, because the way that Amazon initially was setting up their series was they would film a pilot and then put it out there for the public?
Exactly what they did.
So you had, how much weight was there between
a lot.
The first and then the five episodes?
I think we shot the pilot in August or September, and they didn't pick it up until December. So it was a long wait. Hopefully it won't be that long to find out that we're going to do the third season.
Oh, that would be lovely, yes.
Yeah,
so doing these,
who knows?
Doing something like a 6-week, like
right.
You've gone on location, do this 6-week thing. I'm just kind of curious how that plays out. You've reconnected with everybody in the show, especially the core characters of the show, this family unit in the show, and you're digging deeper into character. So what does that do for you? I mean,
it's heaven for them. It's like an actor's dream come true. Partly because the way it was set up, and they do this thing, they block shooting, where you're shooting the same direct in this episode. Tig directed this first episode, and she's really, I think, the first time she's directed. She had a lot of help from people around in Video Village, but she directed it. And then Ken Kwapis, who's a wonderful film director and directed 2 of them last season, directed the next 2, and then a British woman named Minky Spiro directed the last 2. So they would, when they had 2, they would shoot both episodes at once. And then they shot all the exteriors at once. So you'd never finished an episode. But that said, I worked almost every day. And, there would be breaks, but it would be pretty, that I live in New York. I was working in LA and New Orleans. I actually had a friend of mine who was sort of coaching, and that was very helpful. But I was living for the very intense period of 6 weeks. It was everything. I was only thinking about, dreaming about doing it.
So it's pretty immersive in that regard.
Completely.
Yeah.
Which was just fantastic.
And is that somewhat rare? I mean, because you've done like so many films, and the difference between that and then this ongoing story that gets to play out over a series of episodes. Right. And there's a lot of change that happens within this 6 episodes too for you too. Right.
A friend of mine once described like being a day player or coming into a project or a movie like jumping on a moving train. Which it's like that. I mean, the thing is going and you've got to jump on and be there. But this was not like that. This was like you were the train. You were the conductor or something.
There's a lovely quote that Bill says to the Cheryl Lee Ralph character midway through the season where he says, "There's nothing better really than safety and order," which really is to me this character in a nutshell. Yes. And what's so great about if anybody knows who Cheryl Lee Ralph is, she's a sort of a Broadway diva type, and she's really
her internet handle is diva.
Oh, well, there you go. And playing. I mean, if this is against type for you, this is so against type for Cheryl Lee Ralph. She's basically playing the female version of Bill.
Exactly.
And so in that regards, when you say there's nothing better really than safety and order, she completely buys into that. Yeah. And so in terms of your working relationship with Cheryl, I want to know something about it because you're in for a treat.
I'm so glad that you asked me that.
Yes.
It's a great question. And it's funny that Cheryl Lee's profession is she's in insurance and I'm in frozen food. And we understand each other. And it's true that is really smart casting, that they did the same. They took this diva who was like playing Madame Marable on
Wicked,
Broadway
right?
in
Yeah.
Wicked, and no makeup, no, this completely stripped down, repressed character, but all of that diva sort of in there. And it's the same thing kind of with me, and it was love at first sight. I mean, I have to say, I had, I didn't know her, and I had no idea what I was in for. And the first day with those scenes in the office, and the first day working with her, I was just like, oh my God, how did they find this? This is like such a gift. And every time I worked, every day with her was like just so fun. I adore her now. I mean, she is like...
It's absolutely hilarious watching her like clip her
Oh
words. I
my
mean, she is,
God.
again, playing this very precise and detailed person and not letting anything out until it comes out, because it's a great television show. It's got to at some point, right? But is it true that she studied your performance in the first season?
Yeah, apparently, no. They told her she was on Broadway doing Wicked. She was going to go on, tape for this. And they said, look at Bill, look at the first season, and that's what we want you to do. So I didn't realize that that's what she was doing. She was doing me.
So is that flattering?
Yeah, well, it worked. It's like it's really funny.
And it's actually very, very
But
touching. Yeah.
she's a black woman with first of all, she's incredibly smart. I mean, the character is smart. And what she has said, she's so happy that she gets to say some of the stuff that she gets to say, to sort of talk about what it is. I mean, there's an incredible, they're having dinner at a plantation. And I can't, this is a spoiler, you have to watch, but you'll see. She's really gets a chance to do something wonderful and important, I think.
It's a little bit foreshadowed, maybe even in this first episode, as we were saying before we started watching the episode, that the Robert E. Lee reference in this first episode, when you think about what we've been going through in recent weeks with
and
the
believe me,
figures
they
and
knew
stuff.
nothing. I mean, that was back in January they wrote that.
Yeah.
And when she says, well, it's all good, or that Billy's comment about, well, both sides are right.
Both
I mean,
sides,
come
yeah.
on.
I mean, in this episode, it's just it's almost chilling in a way, but
And,
at the same time, yeah.
and the fact that in the background, and this was also true last season, they're fighting the Civil War. They're Civil War reenactors. That's come on, that's so amazing.
So the fact that you're awakening is also a awakening to the realities of the South and racism. I mean, so Bill goes through lots of steps here. And again, this isn't so much spoilers, it's just discussing character here in a lot of ways. And in that regards, it's also, so the timeliness of this particular story is unexpected as well. Because it's such a personal story, you don't expect it to have this kind of resonance. So,
Yeah, it's true. And, it's not easy. I mean, the thing is, the guy is changing. To go back to your question about, the arc and the season, people don't change on it. They don't he's 65 years old in this thing. He's lived, and his strategy, his control has been very effective. I mean, look at his house. He's a very successful guy, as is she. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder can be a very effective way of living. I mean, you're organized, you have your rule, and it's worked for him. I mean, his wife was the most beautiful, she was cheating on him in the first season. He didn't know any of it really, but, he married the most beautiful girl in town and, he was very successful in frozen food. But, so changing, falling in love, which is what's going on, and waking up to the world that he lives in, politically as well as, socially, it's a hard thing for him. And that's what makes the show is so real and so many, there's a reality base of the whole thing. And you feel it in the writing. You feel, because she has a writer's room, there are 10 writers writing. People told her that she should write the thing herself. She writes all of her stand-up. Right. But fortunately, they persuaded her to have a writer's room. 10 writers, all women.
Right.
Now, there were 2 guys last season. They got rid of them. And only women. And all the stories are their stories. I mean, it's not just Tig. But it's based on their real on reality, you know.
And it sort of builds to, in the finale, you have a wonderful scene with her on the porch where it all comes out. It becomes to come out toward the end of last season, as you said, in terms of dealing with the tragedy of her childhood. And it comes up in that first episode where she's talking about the molestation, which is an undercurrent. I mean, it's a very rare show to be this serious and still be considered a comedy, I guess.
Well, we did get some laughs even here this afternoon. No, I mean,
it's a very delicate balance.
It is,
the show does, yeah.
I have to say, the first episode is the least. It gets funnier.
Yes.
It gets lighter as Remy falls in love with a fabulous actress named Carly Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know her, but she was in Hairspray, and she playing what's the
Tracy,
lead?
I would imagine,
Tracy
right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
in Hairspray. Picture it, and that's who Remy falls in love with. And she ends up moving in, and they have a relationship. And Cheryl and I have, and Tig has a relationship. So it's a love fest.
And your
it's a love fest.
and your reactions to Carly are some of the biggest comedy on the show.
Right.
Is watching this robust woman come into your house and basically you have a lot of disruptors in your life this season, which is where I think a lot of the comedy comes in.
True.
Am I right?
Yes, and she's talked about the fact that her MO as a character is she never apologizes for anything. She's right out there, and it's all good, and she makes no apology for breaking his heirlooms and telling, he's like horrible nightmare for him.
Invading his freezer with her.
Right.
With her
but his son, who's kind of, been stuck in life and living above the garage and has never had a relationship and now he's in love, he's falling, so that is a good thing. Right. And he's going on a diet and, So
in some regards, this season about breaking down Bill's defenses in many regards too. So at the very end, when you really open up, when was that scene shot in the process of the 6 episodes, the final scene with you and Tig?
Let me tell you one thing.
I will tell you, I watched it at work, and I was really, really trying to maintain my composure because I work against a glass wall. So if I'm crying when I'm watching, which I sometimes do, it was really a beautiful scene, I gotta say.
3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh no.
Literally 3 after a very long day outside on the porch, 3 in the morning, and it was a very hard scene because what's also going on in that scene is that you don't see it, but this woman that I've fallen in love with, Cheryl Lee, is leaving me. You don't know what happened, but she's. I think I've lost her.
You fear you have.
I fear I have. Mm-hmm. And it's, so it brings up the loss, the primal loss. I mean, it's just very tough. But it was freezing cold, and we were in Carmelita, someplace in California, I don't know. We were someplace where it was freezing cold, and it was 3 in the morning, and all of that helps in its way,
Well, it's a terrific season for the character.
I'm very proud of it, and really, totally worth buying Amazon Prime to see it if you don't have it already.
Well, if you'd been told that your longest live TV experience was going to be on Amazon a couple of years ago, it's a whole great new world.
But
right?
I have to think, we have my wife is a book publisher. Amazon was not a good word in our house for a long time, but it's been the greatest. I mean, I was just thinking today about this experience of having this show streaming, which means people can watch it in their own time, in their own. It's not like, you had to go watch it or you had to go out to a movie. I mean, I want people to see it, and they are, and it's kind of building, and it's going to be there, and they can go back and watch the first season, and that is just great.
Yeah, it's a brand, it's a new template, and it's a new way of storytelling. And these are stories as well. Like One Mississippi, I have to think is a story that probably could not have been told in the medium of television without this kind of an outlet, as whether it's Amazon or Netflix or what have you. They're telling stories that you would not ordinarily see. For Tig Notaro to tell this version of her life story, I mean, who would give her that opportunity without these platforms? So I think it's a really positive thing for.
I mean, it's an interesting, as a guy who writes for TV Guide, I'm sure you've read that, Jeff Bezos is saying he wants to change the whole thing and do tentpole. He wants Game of Thrones. He doesn't want these stories. I mean, it's a little scary
It's a little
because
scary, but at the same time, they're going to have to be a full service, whereas all these streaming services have all kinds of shows
Yeah,
on their service to appeal to different kind of
but
tastes.
you know, the creative director, the Joe Lewis, who runs the creative executives at Amazon, have been fantastic, and they're giving. And the one thing that they're doing, they're giving creative control to Tig Notaro, to the writers. There's no executives telling them, no, you can't do that, or you can't. I mean, they take some real chances with this show, and nobody's telling them they can't. So it's like,
and even with 2 seasons, the fact it got renewed, it's like these are like little miracles that
Yeah,
happen
no, it
in
is.
the world of TV nowadays. And in terms of this career that you've had, to have this coming along at this point, so I mean,
never too late, guys. Really.
although you've had your career you've worked with so many incredible people along the way, and in the film medium in particular, and theater as well. So it seems like you always see you. It's like it's like we know you. It feels like, you know. But if you would talk a little bit about a lot of times in these forums to talk to this audience about how that life sort of comes to be. Where does it get started? I mean, you went to the Yale School of Drama, but was this your goal before and all that? I mean, how did it all get started?
Well, my father, who was a lawyer, wanted to be an actor and was sort of a frustrated actor. He was a trial lawyer, and he was very involved in community theater. I grew up in Baltimore, and he would take me when I was little to like rehearsals of the Baltimore Actors Theater, where it was sort of semi-professional theater. He ended up founding Center Stage in Baltimore later. But so I did it in high school. I liked it, and people actually said to me, you know, you could do this. I went to college. I was afraid I would end up doing this, so I tried to do something else. I really did. I mean, I spent 3 years staying away from it. Then I auditioned for a play, sort of had an epiphany, and I said, God, this is really seems right. Took a year off, was an apprentice at Center Stage. Then I went to drama school, and then I came to New York, and, you know, had some rough, I mean, it's funny that somebody told me this was the unemployment office.
Oh, this building?
This building was, and I remember it, because you had to sign, back in the day, you actually had to go to unemployment and sign up for unemployment and show up, and I did. You know, it was like I mean, I do a thing now where I mentor young actors graduating from the drama school, and, you know, it still can be very hard to get started. And you have to go through those years until you just have this vision. And, you know, I mean, I think it was 3 years or so. And then Woody Allen cast me in Stardust Memories, which was it's a wonderful movie. I was on it for 24 weeks. I had a great part.
That was your first film?
First film. I said it's been downhill since then.
I mean, he brought you back a couple of times, right?
He did. I did Purple Rose of Cairo, Zelig, and Radio Days, and every year. And his casting director, Julia Taylor, liked me, so I was doing lots of other, Paul Mazursky, Mike Nichol. I mean, it was like the 80s were like great for making movies in New York for me.
Oh, man.
And I have to say that the Screen Actors Guild was great for supporting me as an actor, and, you know, feeling like you could have a legitimate career and a life.
And you're currently on the board?
I am on the board.
Right.
I am. I just was elected to the board again.
Right.
And I have to say that I give every residual that I make for 120 movies under $10, which I make plenty of under $10 residuals to the actors, to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation.
Sweet.
Yeah, which is great.
We have one question from the audience, and it is from Mike, and who asks, how do you as an actor prepare for each role, character-wise, script-wise, etc.? And the example here is General John Reynolds in Gettysburg.
Well, that was one of the great experiences of my life. But I do a lot. I mean, depends on the.
Is there? Really? Twitter.
It's good. It depends on the role, but I like to do research. I like to find out as much as I can about the character that I'm going to play. So General Reynolds, there was a lot written about him There's a book about, his journals. He was quite an amazing character. And Gettysburg came after Ken Burns, after the Civil War. It sort of opened everybody's. But that was, I ride a horse in that movie. I mean, this is a good actor thing. Because so everybody who rides horses in Gettysburg was brought to Gettysburg for a week to ride around the countryside and, ride. And I knew how to ride, but, as a kid, I hadn't done it. I hired a riding, because the whole thing is on a horse. I mean, in fact, I got to act on horseback with Sam Elliott, like one of the great horseback actors.
You're going to follow anybody,
And acting on horseback, I've only done it in that one thing. It was the most, I just loved it. But I found a riding coach in Queens, in Forest Park. Forest Park in Queens. And I said, I want you to make me look like I really know what I'm doing on the horse. And, she said, you want to look right between his ears. She gave me gestures. Right. And in Gettysburg, in the park, there are 3 equestrian statues of John Reynolds sitting up on his horse. So, again, it sort of was the physical thing. And then shooting it in Gettysburg, you do all that. But then on the day, you forget it all and you're there. 3,000 reenactors. Okay, you asked this question. The day that I got there, the first day, it was a battle that was a B unit. They were just putting me on the horse and riding through the troop, but the hill was full of troops and fire and bombs and everything. And as I rode out on the thing, these reenactors they're not actors, and they're playing this thing for their whole, it's real. Yeah. And they're going, General Reynolds, sir, and they're all treating me like I am General Reynolds. And that's very helpful.
I can't believe we came back full circle to Civil War reenactments here.
Yeah, so anyway, Civil War reenactments. Been there, done that.
So many stories in an actor's life, for heaven's sake. But anyway, this is the end of our conversation, but I really appreciate you all coming. I appreciate you being here. And it's a great second season, everybody. Please watch it. Yes.